Hello, dear listener. A quick warning, this review involves a brief mention of blood and gore, creepy things, the sound of creepy bugs and gunshots, and has an overall unsettling vibe due to the show being discussed. Listener discretion is advised.
This is a story about your student. Well, actually, it's a story about a review of a podcast, but in this exact moment in time, the story is also about your student. They smile at what they are about to say.
Welcome to Nightvale. Sorry, I got a bit overzealous there.
Your student is nervous, so they lean into the comedy and creepiness of the show that they're about to discuss. They remember 2 of the episodes so far being narrated like this. Yes, the entire audio recording is like this. I will exist for as long as it goes. They don't know why, but they thought it'd be funny to write me in. They do not know of the powers they hold.
Anyways, let's start with a small bit of history, yeah? The podcast is called Welcome to Nightvale. It's a still continuing horror comedy podcast that was created in 2012 by Joseph Fink and Jeffrey Craner. Joseph Fink is known for producing another podcast called Alice Isn't Dead. Like Fink, Jeffrey Craner is also known for producing a different podcast named Within the Wires. Together, they have written several books that are set in the Nightvale universe, and separately, they've written books that stand out on their own.
But you don't want to hear about those other books and podcasts, nor the authors. You could care less. You want to listen to your student explain this Welcome to Nightvale podcast to you. Or explain as much as they know, since they're only on episode 75 and there's over 200. They still have a long way to go. A very, very, very long way to go. They think the show is interesting and entertaining though, and will see it through till the end, whenever that is. But enough of what they thought. That comes later in the review. For now, they begin their explanation of what the overarching story of the podcast is all about.
Each episode is about 20 to 30 minutes long. They're in the style of a stereotypical radio show, like one you would hear on, well, the radio station of a small city. It's set in the southwestern deserts in America, where you typically wouldn't think a city would exist. But it does. For the most part.
Your student is unsure of how much of the story to tell, since they don't want to spoil too much. They're known for spoiling things. They continue.
The ever-so-smooth voice of Cecil Baldwin, who plays the main character Cecil Palmer, fills your ears with the goings-ons of his hometown. But things are not all as they seem. The town exists and lives as if every single conspiracy theory, eldritch horror, paranormal activity, or supernatural event that you can think of was true, and they act as if it's normal.
They laugh and then hesitate because I am describing what they are doing. They look around. I am still talking. I am still here.
Will you shut up already?
Apologies. Please, continue.
Thank you. Anyways, Cecil, the radio host, has no clear description of what he looks like. Just that he is not too short or tall, not fat or too thin. He also seems a bit omnipresent, but he also seems to be unaware that he is in fact probably omnipresent and probably immortal. He reports on things that are happening around the town right as they're going on. And he's had this job for a long time and can remember events in history very well because he was there. He can also be a very unreliable narrator, so maybe all this is untrue. But in the end, he adores his job and his dear listeners.
Dear listeners, I've been told to inform you that you are to stop looking at the clouds immediately. Stop knowing about the clouds.
Sometimes he gets possessed by some random entity and his voice changes.
We... The woman from Italy, oh merciful goddess.
Creepy. Other times, people will come visit him in the studio, or call in, as some radio shows do in real life.
Your student thinks about who calls in or visits during the podcast and smiles as they recall some of their favorite characters so far.
The first guest to appear on the show was Carlos the Scientist, who, the first time he appears, was voiced by Jeffrey Craner, but after is voiced by Dylan Marin. He is a scientist. It's never specified what kind he is, though.
exciting, right?
Everything is exciting, particularly existence. Existence is the most thrilling fact of all.
In the first episode, he moves into Nightvale to observe all the scientific oddities the town has to offer. He later goes on to become Cecil's boyfriend, and their relationship built throughout the show is portrayed as healthy and wholesome, but bordering on sickly sweet.
But hey, listen, I'm in the middle of a show.
Yeah, I know. You're covering the story about the condos. That's why I called.
Well, I didn't know you listened to my show.
Every time you're on.
Okay, hold on, listeners.
Your student ponders for a moment more, since there are so many characters to name, but only so much time to write and speak and produce. Deadlines do exist for a reason, after all.
Another one of my favorites is Kevin, voiced by Kevin R. Free, who is, I'll say, Cecil's counterpart. He is also a radio host, but lives in a neighboring town called Desert Bluffs, and has a friendly and calming voice that counteracts Cecil's own deep and luxurious one.
Warn me? About Strex? Why would you ever need to warn me about an honest family business like Strex? Why, ever since...
As mentioned, he loves to work for Strex Corp, the corporate empire that runs Desert Bluffs. And he is a bit too interested in blood and gore. It's unfortunate, since I really hate that stuff. I think any sane person would, but no one ever said he was sane. But he's a really interesting character the later in the series you get.
Your student grimaces, for even the thought of blood makes their skin crawl. Considering there's a lot of blood inside them currently, and that they are now thinking about that current thought, their mouth is agape in horror. They quickly think of another character to name.
Let's see. There's also Dana Cardinal, voiced by Jessica Nicole, who's one of the few interns of the Nightvale community radio program to survive the program. By the way, most of the interns do not survive their internship at the station. I feel that's supposed to represent how most people who do internships do not go on to continue that job.
Cecil, it's Dana. I found a way out of here. I walked the perimeter of the dog park looking for a crack or a hole or a weak spot in the obsidian walls. I never found an opening, but this is very strange.
They chuckle nervously. One more character. Just one more. That will round it out, and then they can move on to the review section.
One more character that I find hilarious is the literal five-headed dragon, Hiram McDaniels. When he's first mentioned, he is wanted for insurance fraud. No, I am not joking. He also attempts to run for mayor.
You've also heard that I am literally a five-headed dragon. All of that is completely correct. But what you haven't heard is that I'm literally a five-headed dragon? Who cares?
They giggle. The thought of a five-headed dragon in a suit running for mayor is just so ridiculous, they had to include him. They also love dragons.
There are several more wonderful and interesting characters that the podcast has to offer, but I'm afraid you're going to have to listen to it if you want to hear about all of them.
They sigh in relief. This was, hopefully, going smoothly. But then they remember they should probably talk about the different segments usually shown on the radio show, and they groan internally. As much as your student loves to gush about the things they enjoy, this was getting to be a bit much. But you didn't know that. Well, now you do. Congratulations.
Look, you quit it! Anyways, now let me carry you on to the next segment of my review, which is to discuss the segments of the show that are usually found on the podcast. So first, the weather. No. Well, I suppose that's technically correct. The segment played on almost every episode so far is, in fact, the weather. Stop! But as you can see, it's a segue to a song. Sometimes the song relates to the show, sometimes it doesn't. During each show it's different, and during each show, the weather I will turn this recording off if you don't stop.
Your student scowls. They think it's me. They stare at their mic. It's not my fault that any time the events that occur to the sky are mentioned, the music plays. That's just what happens. After hearing this, they sigh and continue.
During each show, it's a little cliffhanger, or a good break to reflect on what just happened in the story. I tend to skip it though, since it can occasionally take me out of the story, but sometimes there's some bangers that I can't help but listen to.
They think of the famous Waiting for the Bus in the Rain song featured in the 3rd episode. There's been so many. They still had so many more to go.
Some other segments that occur are Traffic, which is usually a poem or creepy story and not traffic at all, Children's Fun Fact Science Corner, which children should never listen to, Community Calendar, which often lists a day of the week that no longer exists, and Corrections, which are corrections to topics that have never actually been mentioned in the show previously. And of course, there is the normal regular news, which is not very normal at all. Cecil narrates the news in between each segment, but because of the WEATHER segment, the big news usually concludes afterwards with a nice lesson or proverb of sorts to round out the show. Now that we have all that out of the way, on to my review, aka my opinion. WTNV is a great podcast. So far. I will admit I've only listened to about 75 episodes so far. But so far, it's good. You can tell the love and the craft that went into creating it. The comedy usually hits the spot, and the horror is not too bad either. More on the just slightly creepy side, but there are some episodes that border on the line of, this is weird, to sleep? Ha! Who's heard of that? But as someone who is a bit of a scaredy cat, it's honestly not that bad.
Your student thinks of their favorite episodes, almost too many to name, so they think of 5. Episode 3, Station Management. Episodes 19A and 19B, The Sandstorm. Episode 39, The Woman from Italy. And Episode 71, The Registry of Middle School Crushes. There's more they enjoy, but again, only so much time to talk about the show. Or to think about it. To think about anything. They move on.
Right. Well, yes, those were some of my favorites. Thank you, odd narrator voice.
Anytime.
The use of sound effects from the start is wonderful as well. When I first wrote this, I thought they were lacking, but then I realized that the sound effects were usually hidden by the fact that I tend to occasionally listen to the show on the shuttle. Shuttles tend to be very loud, even when everyone is silent. But one of my favorite, and also very much least favorite, segments where they harness the power of a good mix of sound effects is from episode 68, Faceless Old Woman. Let's take a listen.
Now there's a very long insect crawling into my ear. It's all the way in my ear now. I am not okay with this faceless old woman. Faceless old woman? Oh, God. Listeners, hang on while I get this silverfish out of my ear canal. Okay, so, traffic.
So disgusting, and very uncomfortable, but it was executed well. I hate how many times I had to listen to that while making this. Ew. Sorry you had to listen to that. And while the voice acting is not always perfect in the earlier episodes, as the show continues, the acting just keeps getting better. Of course, they have had their practice, so this would make sense. Cecil, though, was fantastic from the start. Here's his first line in episode 1, and then his second to last line in episode 75 as proof.
A friendly desert community where the sun is hot, the moon is beautiful, and mysterious lights pass overhead while we all pretend to sleep. Stay tuned next for a different you, and a different you, and a different you again. Each you denying their multiple nature.
Wasn't that great? Maybe you need context for that last line, but it was the time to explain that.
Your student hesitates once more, unsure of how to end their recording. They've never been good at endings. They think they can leave it up to me, but they know they must continue, for I only exist in this recording. They will continue on until they no longer do. They thought of something. Your student knows this will be cheesy. but they inhale and smile and speak anyways.
Well, as Cecil states in every episode he's in, good night, Nightvale. Good night.